How can we explain the Security Council's failure to impose a ceasefire in Gaza? To what extent is this linked to the Council's ongoing struggle to reform and expand its membership? I previously spoke with Ahmed Fathi, a journalist specializing in UN affairs. Ahmed, welcome to our program from Washington. Thank you for joining us. Regarding the issue of Gaza, the Security Council was slow to reach a resolution on a ceasefire. Then it adopted a resolution for a ceasefire, and the ceasefire has not been implemented since the adoption of this resolution. Why was the composition of the Security Council as stipulated in the Charter of the United Nations from 1945 to the present day? And the five powers or the five permanent members in the circumstances of the new Cold War that we are living at this stage makes reaching consensus something I don't say impossible, but it is very... The difficulty is that the United States finds France and England on one side and Russia and China on the other side. But also the truth is that China sometimes abstains from voting, and the United Kingdom as well. But you find that the Russian-American conflict is controlled. There was more than one attempt to obtain a Security Council resolution for a ceasefire in Gaza, but it failed in most cases as a result of the hardening of the American position and their desire to have a specific language that concerns Hamas between them. Okay, if you allow me, I mean, in addition to this point is exactly the issue of the hardening of the American position. I mean, as you know, there are those who say the absent present in the Security Council meetings is Israel, as if it is a member of the Security Council in view of the positions taken by the United States on its behalf. I mean, since the issue of Gaza concerns Israel, was the difficulty in reaching a ceasefire resolution in Gaza more difficult than other resolutions from other issues considered by the Security Council? And there were differences between the Americans and other members, of course, Israel. As I mentioned, it is the hidden member of the member states of the Security Council. It has not entered the Council as a member since its establishment until today, but there are also other problems and pending files between the United States and Russia, perhaps the most prominent of which at the moment is the file of the war in Ukraine. But there are also technical files that are specialized in limiting the proliferation of nuclear weapons, limiting the proliferation of weapons or arming outer space. This is an issue, I mean, it did not get the luck of the media focus around it, but it is a very important issue. The importance is because we imagine that space will be colonized by 3 countries at most, or 4 countries. But what about the rest of the world? There has been a long-standing discussion about reforming the Security Council to include groups such as Africa with a permanent seat. But this issue has been stalled for years. Regarding the recent uprising and focusing on Africa's role, statements by U.S. Representative Lando Tomes Grimfield were that the U.S. supports giving Africa 2 to 3 seats. It is essential to note that the devil is always in the details. Whether granting 2 or 3 permanent seats to countries from Africa, Germany, Brazil, or India, these candidates for membership will not necessarily hold the same power as the 5 permanent members, with or without a veto right. The U.S. government has been clear and explicit for years that there will be no expansion in entitlements if the Security Council's membership is expanded and the core members do not retain veto rights. You mentioned the African Union and South Africa specifically. South Africa's stance on Gaza is well known. They criticize Israeli policies in Gaza and even went to the International Court of Justice. If South Africa were on the Security Council, do you think the outcome would be the same regarding the Gaza ceasefire stalemate? Or might it be different with this hypothetical change in council membership? If circumstances were different, with South Africa and others as permanent members, nothing would change. We already struggled to reach consensus among the current 15 members, 5 permanent and 10 non-permanent. Imagine if the Council had 26 states. How divided would it be? If 25 countries agree on a decision and one uses veto, we're back to square one. We need to amend or regulate veto use. I suggest a system like in courts. If a judge is connected to a case, they step down. We can't have Russia, a permanent member, invade Ukraine and still use veto power in the Security Council. About the veto issue, are major powers clinging to it even if the Council changes? Is this mocking southern countries? Or have southern nations at least put this tough issue on the table? Discussing it is one thing, but giving permanent seats is another. If granted, there'd be two tiers, 5 superpowers and other major powers, 10 countries and regular members representing the rest. This won't be a fair system. Firstly, they won't be able to break the Council's deadlock. Instead, this phase will increase stagnation and stubbornness both in the Palestinian issue and other matters across all issues. Okay, one last question if you don't mind. Recently, we've seen significant and deep discussions on media freedom and journalist safety. Quite briefly, how would you compare this topic in this session of the General Assembly, the 99th session, to past sessions? Things haven't changed much. The double standards seem to be among the fundamentals of international relations or the global system. We can denounce Russia for its invasion of Ukraine, but can't seem to denounce Israel, a theoretically democratic state. But can it truly be democratic if it suppresses press freedom and doesn't protect journalists? We've had a massive number of journalists killed during the Gaza war, which wasn't the case even in world wars. The numbers in this short period alone highlight that journalist killings should have strong protection. They are not combatants and are unaffiliated with any sides, similar to humanitarian aid workers or the Red Cross. But journalists being targeted raises a separate issue. That was Ahmed Fathi, a journalist specializing in United Nations affairs. The episode concludes with a greeting from the United Nations headquarters in New York, where the 79th session of the General Assembly is underway. Join us for a new episode and a new topic next week from Washington on the Aljazeera 3 platform.